Fiona discovers her father is not who she thought, but a scientist hunting supernatural creatures. As she uncovers his secrets with Rowan and Kat, will she agree to Rowan's dangerous plan? Can she bear the consequences it might bring? Dive into a world of mystery and suspense. Subscribe now to unlock the secrets of the night. 7 Creatures of Primordial First Draft. Fiona's POV. I stumbled back to the kitchen chair, sat down hard, and threw myself on the table as sobs racked my body. Before long, I felt a hand rubbing my back in circular motions. I turned my face to find little Kyra looking at me with pity etched on her face. "I take it you know the truth about your father," she whispered and took the seat next to me, reaching for my hand. "Yes," I answered through hiccups, sitting up and wiping my tear-stained face. She looked like a miniature version of her brothers with lighter, curly long hair. "Don't be too hard on yourself, Fiona. I wouldn't have believed a bad word about my father from strangers, either." "Kyra?" Rowan growled. "What?" she asked, throwing him a grimace over her shoulder. "There's more to it," he told her. "Yeah, I heard from the hallway. Why don't you and Rianne go do whatever it is you must regarding this situation, and leave me with Fiona? She doesn't need your scorn right now. We are going to take Kat a tray of food and see if we can get her to come around." "That's a good idea," Rianne stated. "It is," Rowan agreed. "Just be careful what you say, especially around Kat. They could go home and tell everything to that murdering thug, Quinn, and you know how dangerous he is." I couldn't believe my ears. After the way my father spoke to me on the phone, Rowan still thought I was the enemy. I'd proven I knew nothing of my father's devious deeds, and he still didn't trust me. I wanted to curse Rowan and scream until he apologized, but I felt defeated. He didn't seem like the type to apologize, anyway. "Whatever." Kyra ventured and rolled her eyes like a normal 15-year-old. It was hard for me to grasp that she was a werewolf, too. I watched Rowan follow Rianne from the room, and wondered at the emptiness I felt inside in his absence. I should hate him, yet I yearned for him to return and say or do something kind to me. My thoughts were clear since Kyra piped up and said, "Ignore my brother. He doesn't mean it. Ever since our dad died, he's been an uptight wanker." My eyes widened at her profanity, and she giggled. "Well, it's the truth, but he has a lot of stress and responsibility now that he's the alpha. Let's go see if we can rouse your friend." We gathered a tray of food and headed to check in on Kat. I couldn't help wondering why my so-called father only cared about her and not me. That Kat knew father's dirty secrets crossed my mind, but I dismissed it as crazy. There was no way she knew. Kat wouldn't keep something like that from me. We were too close and told each other everything. I followed Kyra through the house, into the bedroom where Kat still slept. "Thank you," I told her as she set the tray on the table by the bed. "I appreciated your kindness more than you know. I'm distraught by everything I've learned and can't believe all that's happened in less than 24 hours. Yesterday, my life was normal. I was nursing a bruised heart from a breakup, but otherwise, I was happy. Kat talked me into going out for girls' night, why I know, to cheer me up." I sighed. "Now look at me. It's a lot for you. I understand even though I'm young. I lost my father and your father is holding my best friend somewhere. So, I know about heartache and loss." Kyra glared at her hands, avoiding my gaze. "The bloody bastard. Oh, sweetie. I'm so sorry and promise to do everything in my power to help bring your friend and people home. I'm not sure what to call them. This is all so foreign to me." I approached with tentative steps and held my arms open. Without hesitation, Kyra allowed me to hug her, and we sat on the bed. Wiping her tears away, she asked, "Have you heard of the creatures of Primordial?" I shook my head. "No. Should I have?" Well, no, but I thought because of your father and all. Honestly, I never knew that side of him, I told her. Kyra nodded and said, I know, and most humans believe they are the only species on Earth. I know some people believe in aliens or ghosts, but the majority think Mother Earth comprises just humans. And it's obvious to me now that's not the case, I said with a raised brow and a cheeky grin. Kyra giggled and continued. Primordial means from the beginning. We have been here since Earth's creation, walking among you. I swallowed the lump in my throat and asked, when you say we, what do you mean? I know about vampires and werewolves now. Clearing my throat, I gave her a pointed look. She shrugged. There's too many to list, but witches, warlocks, fairies, goblins, and gremlins, to name a few, since you know about us and vampires. It depends on what region of the world you live in with some races. There are a lot of werewolves, vampires, witches, and fairies here. I've never seen gremlins, goblins, or vampires, but my brothers keep me on a tight leash. It's because they love you, I said. So, you've seen a proper witch? My eyes widened like plates, expecting her answer. I liked the idea of seeing a witch, a nice one, of course. I always loved watching The Wizard of Oz as a child. Oh, yeah. Rowan has a friend who's a witch. I think she's pretty cool, but Rianne doesn't like her. Kyra lifted her shoulders and let them drop. She's badass. Rianne not liking someone is hard to imagine, I declared with furrowed brows. I love the good witch, Glinda, in The Wizard of Oz. As a girl, I wanted to be her. I laughed at the absurdity of my statement. Well, she's not Rowan's friend. More like an acquaintance since all this unpleasant business with the Sexflex drug. It's affecting all the supernatural races, and she has offered to help. It's not normal for werewolves and witches to get along. Oh, and sirens! She exclaimed. I've never seen one, but I would love to. Rowan says they are very dangerous. Sirens? I questioned. You mean mermaids? Do they exist, too? Yes. I think it would be so cool to be a mermaid. Don't you? A loud groan from Kat gained our attention, and I jumped from the bed. Kitty Cat, I whispered, standing over her. I felt guilty that her breakfast and tea were cold by now. Kyra, please bring her some fresh food and tea, or heat this. I fear we got carried away talking. What's all this about witches and mermaids, and where the hell am I? Kat asked, trying to raise herself on her elbows. Thank God you're awake and fine, I cried out as relief washed through me. Kat fell back against the pillows, grabbing her head. Shush, she whispered. I'm not fine. I feel like I'm going to die. You were drugged, Kyra told her. And you're fine now, I interrupted, for fear of what Kyra would tell her. I knew Kat needed to know everything, but she wasn't coherent enough at the moment. I'll give you guys some time and go fetch Kat some fresh breakfast and tea. Kyra grabbed the tray and winked at me. Coffee, please, Kat said. Sweet and creamy, and can I also have some water? Of course, and I'll be back in a flash. Thank you, Kyra. I helped Kat sit up and propped some pillows under her back. Where the fuck are we? And did you hook up? Kat asked with widened eyes. It's a long, unbelievable story, and no, I did not hook up. I was too busy fearing for your life. I'm so pissed off at you, Katrina. She looked taken aback with her mouth hanging open and her hand over her chest. Kat wasn't used to me yelling at her or calling her by her birth name. However, a confused look replaced the shock, and she asked, "Where's my necklace?" Oh, boy. Well, there was no time like the present. What's the last thing you remember? I asked while she stared down inside her dress and threw off the covers, looking for the silver chain. Calm down, Kat. It's not there. It's gone? No? Oh, God. Oh, God. What will I do? He will kill me. This will be my third strike. He will kill me this time, she sobbed. Who? My father. I asked. It's just a silly necklace, Kat. If you're that worried, I'll give you mine. Alarm bells were ringing in my head. What did she mean? He will kill me this time, sounded literal. Yours is different and he'll know. She yelled and jumped from the bed, pacing the room. No, it's not. Our necklaces are identical, I told her, trying to calm her down. They are not the same. You don't understand, Fiona. Then help me understand, Kat. Oh, how I wish I could, she whispered and sat on the foot of the bed, her face covered with tears and red splotches of color. Your father. He's not the man you think he is. I've already said too much. She placed her hands over her face and cried like a baby. My father isn't just a scientist. I know everything, Kat. He's a bloody monster. A villain straight out of a horror story. But if you knew he was a killer and a hunter, why have you kept it from me? I asked, keeping my tone gentle. A killer. A hunter. Kat lifted her confused gaze, meeting mine. What are you talking about? I slapped my forehead in frustration. What are you talking about? You just said he would kill you for losing a necklace. I sighed and sat down beside her. Tell me what you meant by that, Kat. It's imperative that I know because we are in a hell of a mess. I can't. Kat shook her head and scooted away from me up on the bed. Her body trembled all over. You must, I shouted and stood. Lives depend on it, Kat. I'm sorry if you fear him, but it's not just about you now. She looked at me and took an angry swipe at the tears on her face. So it's fine if he kills me the next time he does experiments on me. You're okay with that? My mind was whirling as my stomach churned. I stood stock still and felt the color drain from my face. I didn't know what to say or do. What's going on in here? Rowan asked from the door, with Kyra beside him holding a fresh breakfast tray. Ain't a proposition worth taking first draft Rowan's POV. Kyra busted me as I stood listening outside the door. I heard Fiona's voice rising with Kat's muffled cries and my need to know what they were saying won out, and I pressed my ear to the door, feeling like a first-rate ass. After being admonished by my little sister, I explained it was important for me to know everything. She threw me her signature eye roll, held up the heavy tray she carried, and said, "You might as well go in, geez. I know you're impossible sometimes, but eavesdropping is just rude." She was right. I opened the door and asked, "What's going on in here?" Fiona paced the room while Kat cowered at the head of the bed, and it was clear she was afraid of Quinn. It made sense why he insisted we return Kat to him, not Fiona, in exchange for our kidnapped pack members. The bastard was experimenting on her and it sickened me, but I needed to know why. Why would he experiment with a human girl? I could only come up with two reasons: either she wasn't human, or he was a sick fucker. Damn, I need more information. I now had extreme guilt at having to send them back to him, but, unfortunately, I didn't have a choice. My priority was my pack, and it was my responsibility to protect them at all costs, and I couldn't let any feelings of remorse get in the way. My guts churned at the mere thought, and my heart ached knowing I was sending my mate back to a father with no regard for her. He was a complete nut job, and I feared what he may do to Fiona. He was using Kat for some unethical scientific experiment. Would he do the same to his daughter? Don't send your Luna back, my inner beast roared in my head. My demented father has been doing experiments on Kat. Pain and bewilderment marred Fiona's beautiful features. She raked a hand through her long, dark tresses. We can't send her back to that brute. Here's everything you guys said and more. Kyra, take the tray in. Kat has to eat after taking that Sexflex pill, I said, trying to avoid the inevitable. Thank you, but I don't think I can eat anything, Kat whispered, staring at her hands gripping the sheets. Maybe just some water, please. Of course. Kyra placed the tray on the table and handed Kat a bottle of water. Drink that and try to eat the toast because you have to eat something, I told her in a stern but calm voice. Kat glanced at me and her eyes grew large before averting them and accepting the water from Kyra. She looked back down at the bed. I will. Thank you. Christ, she's petrified. Kyra, see that she eats and after hydrating with water, coffee will help. Right now, I need to speak to Fiona in private. I glared at them, ready to insist when Kyra nodded and Fiona approached me at the door. Phew, I was relieved but had expected Fiona to resist. We won't be gone long and if you need us, we'll be in my office. I stood back, allowing Fiona to walk out ahead of me. I am a gentleman most of the time. However, sometimes I can't be anything but Alpha O'Connell, and this was one of those times. Fiona followed me in silence, giving me time to think. If she didn't already detest me, Fiona would loathe me after this chat, and I dreaded it. Making tough decisions, especially ones involving the fate or well-being of someone else, wasn't my favorite thing to do. I wasn't a cold, unfeeling person who enjoyed other people's suffering or pain, and it bothered me more than I cared to admit. Yet when it came down to it, I had to base my decisions on what was best for my family and pack. So, I steeled myself, ready to push all emotions to the side and do what my duty called for. I opened my office door, and let the earth tones of the room soothe me. This was my sanctuary, and I loved how the light streamed in through the palladium windows and the massive stone fireplace reached the vaulted ceiling. My mother decorated it after my father died. She wanted the room to reflect my personality with soft suede furniture, a large sheepskin rug, and white oak tables to match the massive desk dominating the middle of the room. Nice room, Fiona said, looking up at the lofty ceiling before her gaze landed on mine. My first instinct was to sit behind my desk, but this was a delicate situation, and I didn't want her feeling any more intimidated than she already was. I motioned to the couch. Let's take a seat. Fiona narrowed her eyes, and I knew she was worried about what I was going to say, but obliged. What's this about? She sat with her back ramrod straight and her palms flat on her thighs. I truly don't want to send you and Kat back to that monster, I said with passion while staring into her vast, uncertain eyes. It startled me when she squeezed my hand and smiled. Her simple touch was electrifying, causing my nerve endings to sizzle, and I knew how easy it would be to lose myself in her eyes, her touch, her taste. Wow, I'm so relieved to hear you say that, Rowan. I did not know what my father was doing to Kat, and I'm sorry about everything. What can I even say? I can't believe everything I've learned and want nothing to do with my father anymore. I've washed my hands of him, but what about your people? She sighed, shaking her head in disbelief. She was making this far worse than I imagined. I'd hoped for some scorn over how I had treated her or some sass at the very least. I could deal with scorn and sass, but this I couldn't take. She looked at me like I was her hero, or a lifeline, with her tiny hand still clasped in mine. God, this is gonna be harder than I thought. Oh, Fiona. I took her small hand in both of mine, holding it with care. You misunderstood, love. I don't want to send you back to him, but I must. I grimaced as I watched my words sink in, wanting nothing more than to hold her and tell her everything would be fine. The look of joy on her face vanished, and she snatched her hand from mine, jumping from the couch. Of course you do. What was I thinking? She rubbed her temples while pacing the room. Why would you not turn us over to the monster holding your people? She stopped moving and turned to face me. I understand. I really do. It was selfish of me to assume you would protect two perfect strangers over your own. Call my father and tell him we will come home. Fiona crossed her arms under her heaving chest and gave me a sad smile. She was breaking my heart into pieces. I've already made plans with that bastard, Quinn. Can I propose something? Something that will benefit us both. I raised my brows and prayed she would at least listen and think about it. I'd racked my brain to come up with a solution, and it wasn't until Rian mentioned something to me that it all clicked. 2 heads and all that. A proposition, you say? Phew, I thought in silence. Yes. I spoke with Rian and he thinks Quinn is also behind this whole Sexflex drug epidemic. Look, I get it. He's a horrible person, but that doesn't mean he's responsible for every bad thing happening around here. She rolled her eyes and planted her fists on her hips. Think about it, Fiona. Your father is a scientist, right? You said yourself that he's saved lives. He's developed vaccines and oh, shit. Drugs, Rowan. I am such a fool. Fiona's eyes grew wide, and she slapped her forehead before walking toward me. I'm so dense. He owns a pharmaceutical company or stock, I believe. I'm not sure. He either owns the company or is a major stockholder. She sat down hard beside me on the couch and blew out a breath. What's the proposition? Because I'm in. I smiled in relief and said, it's simple. Your father, don't call him that. He's no longer my father. He's nothing to me now. Okay, I proceeded with caution. Quinn thinks I'm more than willing to hand you both over, right? We just need to be smart, so I need you to listen and do everything I tell you. Fiona nodded with enthusiasm. We will make the exchange and you have to reconcile with him. Reconcile with him after everything he's done. Fiona groaned and shook her head. Just pretend. Can't you just pretend for Kat? I asked, already knowing the answer. I need you to find something. Anything linking him to the drug. I wouldn't know what to look for, Rowan, she cried. But wait. He's leaving this Friday for some kind of conference. He's going to London. You and Rian can come and search the house. He has a lab at home. That's brilliant, Fiona. How long will he be gone? Just the weekend, but that should give us plenty of time. What about staff? I held my breath. Most of the staff will be off except for our housekeeper, and she won't be a problem. She winked at me. But what will happen to us when he returns? Kat says he will kill her over the necklace, but I don't understand because I have an identical one. If they look interchangeable, have her wear yours as soon as you get home, and once Rian and I arrive, be prepared to leave for good. Don't make it obvious, Fiona. Gather only what you need to survive and anything sentimental, okay? We will hide you and Kat from that bastard. You have my word. Fiona threw her arms around my neck, and that was it for me, the straw that broke the camel's back, as they say. I couldn't control my inner animalistic needs, and my hungry mouth found hers. 9A bittersweet exchange. First draft. Fiona. I tried hard to focus on what Rowan was saying because I knew we had to get this right. We needed all the information he could give us before the exchange, but my mind drifted back to his lips on mine. He had kissed me. Out of the blue, he locked his mouth on mine and something inside me changed. Yeah, I know how silly and cliché it sounded, but there was no other way to describe it. This wasn't normal, and I had been kissed plenty of times before. Perhaps it was love at first kiss, another cliché, but I knew what I felt. His kiss was home mixed with passion, love, and forever. Now I sounded corny, too. I was a right mess. The craziest part was something I couldn't bring myself to think about or analyze yet. Last night I'd come face to face with a vampire, and Rowan was a werewolf. I still couldn't wrap my head around it. Yesterday, I would have bet my life that vampires and werewolves didn't exist, though here we were. Granted, I'd not seen Rowan in werewolf form, but I watched his hand sizzle when he held Kat's necklace, and that had to account for something. A cell phone ringing brought me back to reality, and I listened to Rowan speaking to someone. A smile split his face, and I realized it wasn't my evil father on the other end. That's excellent news, Dermot. Yes, I'll call him now. He hung up and clapped his hands. Listen up, guys. Excellent news. Quinn has turned over all of our people. I watched as Rian reached over and hugged his brother and Kara cried, covering her face. Oh, I'm so happy. She ran and threw her small arms around her large brothers. I felt like an outsider and glanced at a still pale Kat, who shrugged and gave me a tight-lipped smile. I felt uncomfortable, but thought I should say something. That is terrific news. They all turned to me, and the resemblance was uncanny. I couldn't believe that Rowan and Rian were not twins, and Kyra was a smaller, female version of the handsome brothers. I have to contact Quinn, and let him know when the drop-off happens and where. Rowan stared at me, holding my gaze for what felt like an eternity. His brow furrowed as he studied me and a sick feeling gripped me, cold and resentful. Would it help if I proved it to you? Proved what? I told you I believe you about my Quinn, I said with confusion, wondering what was he talking about. If I prove we are werewolves. I know you are. Let's say, curious. He stood leaning back on his desk in light, ripped jeans and a tight V-neck pink t-shirt. I loved when a man wasn't afraid to wear pink. But how did he know I found the whole idea hard to believe? I suppose it would make it easier to believe, but I gulped, hesitating. Afraid. You should be afraid. Kyra giggled. They are naked when they shift back into human form. My eyes widened, and I laughed, thankful for the teen. She knew how to break the ice. I'm not sure we have time for all of that. Honestly, I wasn't ready to see anyone in werewolf form, let alone Rowan. I feared it might change how I felt about him, and if I were honest, I knew that would be for the best. Fancy being attracted to or in love with a werewolf. It was insanity. How long does it take? Kat asked, and we all turned to stare at her. She had been quiet or crying during the entire ordeal, so it was a shock hearing her speak. What? I'm human and wouldn't mind seeing these two. She nodded in their direction, winking, and continued. In their birthday suit. There was the Kat I knew and loved, man crazy. As much as I'd like to oblige the ladies, Rowan said and crossed his arms over his chest. We don't have enough time. I don't want Quinn to think I've gone back on my word. It's fine. I believe you, but it's just hard to imagine, I said, attempting to sound casual. Just call Quinn and let's do this. Rowan crossed the room in 3 quick strides, standing before us, startling me and Kat. His ocean green eyes sharpened into slits, his body went rigid as I watched with fascination. With a shudder, he dropped his head and shoulders for a moment before raising his gaze, pinning us with a glowing orange glare. Kat let out an audible, strangled cry while I stood paralyzed by the spectacle. The intensity of his look faded, and he grinned before clearing his throat. I smothered the shock with the back of my hand, hiding my expression as the room remained silent. Rowan turned, making his way back to the desk and his phone. Rian cleared his throat. Well, not how I would have done it, bro, but you got your point across. Are you all right? He asked, glancing between me and Kat. Kat nodded in silence and I managed a whispered, yes. They need to get used to it, he said in a harsh mocking tone, and I wondered what prompted this change, and decided I better get used to this moody man. I still had to help him, for him to hide us from my wicked father. So you're leaving, Kyra stated, a frown pulling down the corners of her mouth. "Will I ever see you again?" Before I could respond, Rowan said, "They have to go back, KY. It's part of the deal with Quinn, but no worries lass, we will return for them this weekend when the bastard is away." "But will I ever see them again?" Kyra tugged on the sleeves of her hoodie, looking at the carpet. "No," Rowan answered and grabbed the cell phone without looking in his sister's direction. "Of course," Rianne said, confusing everyone. I stood looking among the siblings, feeling embarrassed and exasperated. So, Rowan would rescue us from his enemy, but he wanted nothing to do with me. It was obvious he couldn't get past my parentage, regardless of my innocence. My eye rose like acid reflux in my throat and I could taste it. I wanted the fury to engulf me and take over, otherwise, sadness would descend upon me like lashing rain, and I much preferred being pissed off. There was power in rage, and confidence like you can do anything, whereas grief would consume you, drowning you in its misery. "Look," Rowan said with a scowl, but the intensity wavered when his gaze met mine. "I will make sure Fiona and Kat are safe from Quinn, KY. You won't have to worry, but he would find them here, and I can't put our pack in that kind of danger." He turned to Kyra with a softened expression. "They are human, love. They don't belong in our world." He grabbed the phone and made the arrangements. "It's time." Rowan looked everywhere but at me, searching his desk for keys and wallet. I rushed to Kyra and threw my arms around her. She cried into my shoulder and guilt ate at me, even though I knew she would be fine. Kyra was a lonely teenager in desperate need of female friends, and I prayed Rowan would realize that. "I'll go with you," Rianne said, placing his arm around me and Kyra. "No." Rowan shook his head. "I need you here. I don't trust the bastard, Quinn, and I don't want Kyra left alone. The guards are watching the perimeter, but I'd feel better knowing you were inside with her." I watched Rianne suppress a frown before agreeing to his brother's and Alpha's wishes. "You are right. Kyra's safety is more important, but I will see you two again." Rianne hugged Kat and then me. "I'll miss you both," Kyra said with a sniffle before fleeing from the room. I wanted to run after her, but I knew it was time to go. Rowan was ready to get me out of his hair and life. We walked out to the driveway, and it was bitterly cold even with the jackets Rianne loaned us. "Where's your coat? Are you not freezing?" I watched Rowan hit the alarm button on an all-black Hummer parked right up front and wondered where the sports car was we rode in last night. I figured he had guards and people who worked for him, but I had seen no one besides the family. He remained silent until we were inside the vehicle, buckled in, and the automatic locks sounded. "We don't get cold like humans do." He took off down the long driveway lined with tall trees and said no more. "Well, this is going to be a long ride," I thought and sighed. "You must burn up in the summer," Kat piped up from behind, and I was glad to have her with me. It was clear she was oblivious to the tension between Rowan and me. Or, perhaps she felt it and was doing what she could to make things easier for me. Whatever the case, I was pleased we were in this together. We prefer colder temperatures, but adapt better to the weather than say you guys do. "I get it," Kat said. "Kind of like animals or dogs." Rowan laughed, a deep baritone sound that reverberated throughout the large vehicle, and I found myself jealous of my best friend. I wanted to make him laugh and smile. Instead, he frowned or glared at me most of the time. "Kat." I covered my mouth in shock at her audacity. He was a werewolf, a grumpy one at that. She had gotten very brave. "She's just slagging me, but Kat. Kind of like animals." He smiled at her through the rearview mirror, and my envy grew. There was so much I wanted to say, to ask, but I couldn't. Everything stayed jumbled up inside me. Why did he kiss me, and was it the same for him? Did he feel what I felt, or was it just an ordinary kiss stolen in a moment of regret? I stared out the window at the passing scenery to take my mind off the hollow feeling in my gut. We were in what appeared as a normal complex of expensive homes, but I noticed in the distance a vast wall behind the dwellings and wondered if they all housed werewolf families. The silence was stifling, the air thick, so I said, "And you promised to come this weekend, right?" I regretted the words as soon as they left my mouth. He sighed like my question was an aggravation. "Yes, Fiona. You know how important it is for me to find out more about Sexflex." What a fool I was. He didn't care about saving us. Rowan only cared about the stupid drug and his long-standing fight with his nemesis, my father. His words cut me deep and I felt like crying, but why should I care? He had been cruel to me since finding out I was Cormac Quinn's daughter, so I should be glad to get away from him. Why did I want this rude, moody man? But he wasn't a man at all, not really. He was a bloody werewolf, a beast. It was official. I'd lost my mind and gone balmy. Well, he'd never know, and I'd get over him. Wait just a minute. I've never seen this culture before, I said, watching the changing landscape. We'd driven through a small, unfamiliar area until I saw the familiar sights of Dublin. What was that place? I turned in my seat, looking behind me. Rowan sighed and sped up. Well. I glared at him, crossing my arms and waiting for him to answer a simple question. Why was he acting so dodgy? He cut his eyes at me before returning them to the road. It's nowhere and doesn't exist for you. Blimey. Breathed Kat. That's unreal. What do you mean? I asked in confusion. Let's just say it's not an actual place. He shrugged. You girls would never find it on your own, even if you retraced our route because you're human. Within 10 minutes, we pulled into an abandoned parking lot, and I recognized one of my father's drivers standing beside a grey Rolls-Royce. Well, here we are, Rowan said, staring straight ahead. I told myself he was watching to make sure my father wasn't around, to stay safe. Make sure you find that necklace and give it to Kat to keep her protected from Quinn until the weekend. I heard Kat open her door to get out, but I couldn't make myself exit without saying something. I turned to stare at Rowan and glimpsed a muscle jerk in his jaw before he glanced at me, and I felt like my heart might burst. Rowan opened his mouth to speak, his bright green eyes searing mine, and I held my breath in anticipation. Fiona! Kat screamed from across the parking lot. Come on. Rowan closed his mouth and gestured toward the door, signaling for me to get out. Be safe, he said, throwing me a tight smile. I'll see you soon. Without a word, I nodded and climbed down from the Hummer with my heart breaking into a million pieces. 10 An unholy home. First draft. Fiona's POV. Our driver, James, pulled into the circular drive in front of the massive manor house that had been my home all my life. I looked up at its imposing frame and shuddered, amazed at how quickly I loathed the place. What was my haven was now a place of disgust, and I dreaded getting out of the car. Kat was watching me, and I could tell she felt the same. Let's get this over with, she whispered. I'm really frightened. I know, me too. But we will go to my room and get that blasted chain around your neck. When James got out, I said, if he sees the bandage and asks about the necklace, I'll tell him it's in my purse. James opened the door, and we exited. Thank you, James. Where's father? I had to be careful around him, because he told my father everything. They were thick as thieves or thick as killers, more like. I didn't doubt for a moment that James knew it all, every dirty detail about my father and his repulsive conduct. He's in his lab, not to be disturbed, Miss Quinn. He says he will speak to you in the morning. I let out a breath of relief and smiled at Kat. Thank you, James. We rushed into the house, ran up the staircase, threw open my bedroom door, and locked it. Lay down, Kat. You look pale. I made a beeline for my jewelry armoire, jerking the drawers open, and looking for the necklace. Of course, it was in the very bottom drawer. Should we put it on you? Kat looked at me while I glanced at the bandage on her neck, and I asked, how does it feel? Like a fucking vampire bit me, a blood-sucking bastard. I'm sorry, Kat. We should put it on you to be safe, but I'll change the dressing and try to find a smaller bandage first. And I know we've been through a lot, but once we get out of here, I want to know everything about what that bastard's been doing to you, and why you have kept it from me. Kat nodded as tears formed in her eyes, and I hugged her. I'm so sorry for upsetting you, kitty cat. Let me go find a better bandage. As I glanced back, I noticed how small she looked on the king-sized bed, and I felt rage at my father's sins. I wasn't sure I could be civil to him, but I would try because I had to, but not until I'd asked him some questions burning in my mind. I rebandaged Kat's wound, placed my silver chain around her neck, grabbed us some food from the kitchen, and gathered some clean clothes. We both needed food and a shower in a big way. After pulling off Kyra's clothes as the shower heated, I realized Kat's necklace was still in my bra, and I giggled at the memory. Phew, I said to the empty bathroom. Kat was worried my father would somehow know the difference. I placed the chain around my neck to keep it safe and climbed inside the shower, letting the hot water wash away the grime and shock of the last 24 hours. When I finished, Kat was already asleep, and I crawled in beside her, vowing to tell her about the necklace first thing in the morning. Right now, we both needed a good night's sleep. My bastard of a father looked the same to me. He didn't look like a dangerous killer, just a short, unassuming man with a receding hairline, a slight gut hanging over his belt, grey-streaked faded red hair, and a receding hairline. The only thing remarkable about him was the old septagram tattoo on his arm that he kept hidden unless he was at home. I now knew it was called a fairy star, and wondered why he would have such a thing imprinted on his body forever, especially after finding out he hunted down supernatural creatures. But then again, I wasn't sure if fairies were real. I only had Kyra and Rowan's word they were, but I saw the proof that vampires and werewolves walked among us. Where's Kat? My father sat behind his desk, reading something without looking at me. He had summoned us both, but I told Kat to stay behind. I wanted a private word with Cormac Quinn. I looked around his office with fresh eyes, but nothing jumped out at me. Although uncomfortable now that I knew the truth, this room looked like a typical office. He had books and medical journals piled on every surface, newspaper clippings, science and medical degrees hanging up, and bookshelves along an entire wall. We need to talk first, so I told her to stay behind. I cleared my throat to gain his attention, standing with my arms crossed, glaring at him. Sit down, he barked. Cormac had always been an ass, but I figured it was his personality. He is a man of science, not emotion, but a good father was the excuse I always told myself. Now I realized he was just a horrible person, but I sat down just the same. I wanted answers, but had to play it cool for the long game. Before I could start, he said, "So, I hear you and Kat ran into some trouble at a club." Cormac lifted his head and stared at me, and I saw a muscle in his jaw twitch, a sure sign he was angry, but I didn't give a feck. Trouble? I threw my head back and laughed. That's an understatement. How's Kat? He asked, disregarding me. A bloodthirsty monster attacked her after giving her a pill called Sexflex, for God's sake. I watched him and noticed his eyes widen a bit. He was trying to act calm. But she's fine, just tired, and that's why I told her to stay in bed, and I wanted to ask you some questions. How do you feel after the unfortunate experience of finding yourself surrounded by a pack of mangy werewolves? He shuddered in disgust, and my hatred for him grew. Those mangy wolves had more compassion and honor than he had in his pinky toe, but I had to keep my feelings to myself on the subject. They told me all about you, father. It turns out I have lived my whole life with a bloody stranger, I said as my voice rose with every word. I'm not the bad guy here, Fiona. I'm the guy protecting innocent people from the monsters. He was leaning across his desk, his tone passionate, and I noticed the vein in his forehead throbbing. Something I'd think my daughter would be proud of. Oh, I'm your daughter again. You didn't want me back yesterday, and told them to keep me, I yelled and leaned forward, too. He sat back in his chair and sighed. I am sorry about that, but I was shocked and worried about Kat. I have researched this nasty Sexflex drug, and was concerned for Katrina. Surely you can understand that. She doesn't have parents to protect her, and you were unharmed. He shrugged and threw me a tight smile. I wasn't ready to let it go, but I needed to rein in my anger. They told me you are renowned for hunting these supernatural creatures and that they are called creatures of primordial, and my family has hunted them for years. It's my birthright and yours, Fiona. I realize you are a woman, but there are many female hunters now. My mouth fell open. I'm not interested in hunting down supernatural creatures. I held back what I really want to say. They also told me you do experiments on them and innocent children. I kept my face impassive as my blood boiled in rage thinking about the people and children, including Kat, subjected to his sick mind and torture. I almost lost my composure when he nodded, his disinterest clear, verifying everything I'd been told. Why? I was on the verge of crying. Why do you do it? I yelled. He stood, towering over me, punching his finger at me. Because I'm a bloody scientist and somebody has to keep us humans safe. There's much you don't know, and they have not given you the whole truth. He walked to a bookshelf, pulled down a thick volume, wiped the dust from the front, and approached me. He held the book out to me, and I took it. The creatures of primordial have been around forever, mingling among humans. However, they are not friendly beasts, but dangerous ones. They hunted and enslaved humans for hundreds of generations. After years of abuse, the humans had had enough and revolted against them. It took centuries, but the roles reversed, and we are now the hunters. I looked down at the book in my lap. If it was wrong to treat us like that, why is it okay for you to do the same? It was kill or be killed, Fiona. Only the strongest survive. Yeah, whatever. I rolled my eyes and knew I was doing a poor job of acting like I was cool with everything and looked down at the leather-bound tome he'd given me. I wanted to read it, but not for the reasons my father would appreciate. He laughed, and I whipped my head up from the book. You are not only the spitting image of your mother, but you are like her in every way, he said, smiling and shaking his head. Rarely did he speak of my mother, and I held my breath, hoping to hear more. Besides telling me she died in childbirth having me, I knew little else. Judging from the small photo he gave me that sat on my bedside table, I looked like her. You are too tender-hearted, just like her, and you have pity for those guys, the werewolves, that helped you last night. They saved us. And even knowing who I was, they were still kind. I didn't want to give him too much information to use against them, so I changed the subject. Unlike that vampire that offered the drugs to us and attacked Kat. I have no sympathy for him. Ah, the vampires. Cormac smiled and shook his head. Don't be too hard on Kat. We know vampires for their beauty, which makes it easy for them to find prey. They are all gorgeous, and people flock to them, making it simpler for them than any other creature. You act like they all just run around looking for people to kill or maim. Because that's what they do, Fiona. They may appear normal, but they are the same creatures of time gone by and wouldn't hesitate to take over the world again, and I won't allow it. They would kill us off. Don't you understand? He said, raising his voice. And that's how you justify killing, kidnapping, and experimenting on them. They said you even use children, I said again, snarling my lips in disgust. So they told you about the kids. He looked unashamed like it was normal, and I felt sick. I will experiment on any creature I find, regardless of age. They are like animals to me, animals who carry magic in their bodies and other amazing secrets. I've cured many diseases because of my experiments on them and saved countless lives, Fiona. Shaking my head, I frowned. What you say makes sense, and I understand, I lied. I get it, but I don't like it. Next, I wanted to ask him about doing experiments on Kat, but I couldn't because I had pushed him far enough, and I had to be civil. Good girl. He beamed at me, and I felt bile rise in my throat. I might make a hunter out of you yet. I rushed from the room and made it to the half bath on the ground floor, and heaved my guts up. He was a vile man. Rowan had told me as much, but something about my father admitting it with a smile and pride in his voice turned my stomach, making it so much worse. 11 Wings of a Fairy Second Draft. Rowan's POV. I had been on pins and needles since dropping Fiona and Kat off and champing at the bit, waiting for the weekend. While I was more worried about the girls, I still needed information on the drug. Sexflex. I knew the bastard Quinn was behind it. Fiona occupied my mind more than I cared to admit, and Rianne could tell something was off with me. We took a smaller vehicle that wouldn't stick out like the Hummer, and jumped in an SUV our mother liked to drive. Within 30 minutes, I passed by the gated mansion high on a hill and stopped some distance away to be on the safe side. Once parked, we took our time, trying to look like everyday residents out for a walk, and as we neared the gate, I was relieved to see Fiona standing behind the imposing black bars, grinning at me. Her face lit up with that magical smile, hitting me square in the heart, and her scent reached my nostrils, causing my inner wolf to yearn for her. I took deep breaths to calm the beast, and we jogged to the gate. Is it safe? My eyes darted left and right. Yes. Fiona unlocked the entrance, allowing us in. He's gone, along with all the staff except for the housekeeper, but she's in her office doing weekly inventory. We followed her up the steep driveway to the massive house that Quinn had gained with his unethical, dirty deeds. It wasn't Fiona's fault, and I vowed to remind myself of that and try treating her with understanding. Before we reached the massive door, I said, "Listen, if something goes wrong, we all leave together. If someone captures me or Rianne, the other will get you and Kat out of here, okay?" Fiona nodded and opened the door, ushering us inside. I don't like that plan. Rianne shook his head, glaring at Rowan. And don't feel comfortable leaving anyone behind. Just get the girls back to the house and gather the pack to rescue me, and I'll do the same for you. He narrowed his eyes at me but then nodded. I doubt anything will happen, Fiona assured us. Let's start in Cormac's office and then search his lab. I'm not sure we can get in, but I have an idea that might work. Fiona walked from the large foyer and down a long hallway toward a locked door on the right. She retrieved a key from her bra and unlocked the door, granting us access. Do you put everything in that bra of yours? I asked with a coy smile. She chuckled as we entered Cormac Quinn's private office and spent 20 minutes searching every nook and cranny before moving to the hallway. Kat stood outside the office door and asked how we fared. We found nothing. Fiona sighed, frowning at Kat. But we are going to the lab now. She squinted at Kat and took her hands. Can you come and try to help us? I understand if it's too upsetting. No, I want to come, too. Her voice sounded resolute, so we followed close behind them until we reached some steps through the laundry room. Fiona flicked on the light, and we all descended into a small room with nothing but a door. I noticed the keypad and groaned. How will we get in? Do you have the code? No, I've never been in the lab, but it's voice-activated, too. I'm pretty good at imitating Cormac, and it might work. I'm praying it will. If not, we can try birthdays. I think I know the code unless he changed it, Kat whispered, reminding us this wouldn't be easy for her. I didn't want to imagine what Cormac had done to her, and so many others behind that door. Fiona turned to Kat and retook her hands, squeezing them. Are you sure you want to go in? You don't have to, and we won't think bad of you. No? I'm coming with you. She approached the metal door, hesitated, and punched in some numbers. Red lights lit up. Shit. It's okay. I got this. Kat took a deep breath and repeated the process. The keypad beeped and lit up green. We are in. She turned the handle, and we entered the dark lab. Within seconds, fluorescent lighting engulfed the massive, sterile room. Oh. My. God. Fiona muttered. What is this place? We all stood in stunned silence as we took in the large cages, metal slabs that looked like mortuary tables, hospital-type beds, vials of every shape and size, microscopes, and a large medicine cabinet. As we walked further into the room, there was a made-up cot in the corner across from a small bathroom, a large desk covered with papers, books, journals, and a coffee mug that read, Experiment. Fail. Learn. Repeat on it. Knowing what I did, those 4 innocent words made my stomach turn. What in the actual fuck? Rian said, shaking his head. I hate to think what people have been through down here. I stated and cursed myself, remembering Kat was one of those people subjected to Quinn's scientific whims. I turned toward her with a sympathetic frown. Forgive me, Kat. I'm just appalled by this place. Don't worry. I'm just glad it's no longer a secret, and hopefully, I never have to endure his torture again. We need to look for anything pertaining to Sexflex. Let's be quick about it because I'd hate for us to get caught down here. And I'll search the desk. I made my way over and started with everything on top when I noticed Fiona standing, her gaze focused on the cot in the corner, and her brow furrowed. Fiona. I ventured, disregarding my task. She hesitated before glancing at me with a strange expression on her face. Sorry, she said, her mouth turned down in a frown, and my gut clenched, recognizing her dread. The more I was around her, the more powerful our bond grew, and I sensed her emotions. It was just another reason for me to stay away from her. It's like I've been here before. Or DJVU. She laughed, but the nervous tension was clear in her voice and demeanor. You've never been down here? I asked, with raised brows, and she shook her head no. Not that I can remember, but something seems familiar to me. Kind of like in a dream. It's hard to explain and silly. Sorry, let's do what we came to do and get out of here. Her body shook like a visible tremor, her face paled, and she wandered over to the cot in the corner. I started sweating, and my heart pumped hard inside my chest, mirroring her emotions. What part seems familiar to you? Kat asked, abandoning the file cabinet and turning toward Fiona. This cot I remember. And the cages, but they were far smaller than these. She pointed to the large, human-sized crates. I have dreamed of being held in one before. Rian met my gaze with a frown, and his worried glance mirrored mine. Maybe you were down here when you were young, he said. Perhaps you were playing while your father worked. Rian shrugged. Rian, you're probably right, Fiona smiled and appeared to relax. I still felt uneasy, not liking where my thoughts were leading, but I continued my task. After opening the center drawer and finding nothing, I moved on to the others. When I tugged on the bottom right drawer, it refused to open, and I knew it contained something vital. Cormac has this bottom drawer locked, and I need a key to get into it. He always keeps the keys with him at all times, Kat informed me while approaching the desk. But it's your lucky day. She reached up, pulled a hairpin from her blonde curls arranged on her crown, and crouched down beside my leg. You know how to pick a lock? Rian asked, with awe lighting up his face. Oh, she's a master, Fiona said and laughed. I can't tell you how many locks she picked at university. True to her word, Kat had the drawer opened within seconds. There you go. We will have to leave it unlocked because I'm not that good, and maybe he will think he forgot to lock it. She stood back and shrugged. I rifled through the drawer, grabbing the files named Merlina, Celestria, Katrina, and Fiona. Holy fecking shit. I've found something important. I leafed through the first file and stared at the 3 pairs of eyes glaring at me. This first one is about a fairy named Merlina. It seems Quinn held her captive for some years. Did you say a Merlina? Fiona hissed with rounded eyes. Yes, why? I peered back at her, my gut feeling like I swallowed a rock. That's my mother's name. What else does it say? Well, I've only skimmed, but she was pregnant, I told her with trepidation. What did you say happened to your mother, Fiona? Rianne asked. She died in childbirth, she cried. He told me she died trying to deliver me, and Cormac couldn't save her. If this is your mother. She was a fairy. It was all making sense now. No, that can't be. Fiona took some ragged breaths, and her face looked pinched in pain. She's buried not 5 miles from here. I visit her grave often and have a picture of her on my nightstand. She wasn't a fairy. I searched through the file while Fiona paced the room, with her fists clenched at her sides and a crazed look in her eyes. Kat stood still, but tears ran unchecked down her cheeks as she stared over my head in a daze. There was an envelope with photographs near the back of the file. I pulled the first one out and gawked at the woman with an uncanny resemblance to Fiona. She stood with her arms draped over none other than Cormac Quinn. I laid the file and envelope down, stood from the chair, and looked at Rianne with a warning glance before approaching Fiona. With her tumultuous thoughts rushing through my mind from our bond, I felt her suffering, and I rubbed my chest while clutching the photo. Fiona, I called out to her. She stopped pacing and turned toward me, a searching look in her eyes, causing me more anguish. I held the photo out to her. Is this your mother? She took it with a shaking hand, glaring at it for what felt like forever, before holding it to her chest and sobbing. Yes. Fiona nodded her head. That's my mother. Kat rushed to her side, hugging her, and whispered, Shush, it's going to be okay, my pet. Fiona pulled away and looked at me. Rowan, does that mean I am a fairy? Too? No, Kat answered and wiped at Fiona's tears. It means you're a hybrid like me. And he has our wings locked away somewhere. Cormac removed them when we were infants. Kat grabbed Fiona, as she stumbled and embraced her while they both sobbed. Fuck, Rianne said and ran a hand over his face. What? I yelled, looking at Kat and Fiona, wondering what in the hell was going on. 12 hybrids, sex, and Xenak's first draft. Fiona's POV. I want to see the photos, Rowan. He looked at me, and I hated the pity I saw in his eyes. As he held the envelope against his chest, I felt dizzy, like I would faint. Rowan stood, still clutching the yellowish envelope that showed its age, but made no move to hand it over. I untangled myself from Kat, struggling on weakened legs, and advanced to the desk, placing my palms on the cool wood. Hand them over. Tears welled again in my eyes. Don't make me physically take them from you. Instead, he moved around the desk and faced me. Are you sure now is a good time to look at these, lass? He raised his brows and grimaced. I want to see them right now. I turned, facing Kat, who was standing beside Rianne. And you? With narrowed, wet eyes, I shouted, You knew all this, Katrina. I thought you were my best friend, the sister I never had, the sister of my heart. How could you keep this from me? Kat cried anew, and Rianne placed his arm around her waist. I wanted to tell you, Fee, I really did. I needed to unburden myself from carrying this torment all alone. How do you think I felt going through this by myself? She screamed while Rowan tried to console her. Don't you get it? Think about it, Fiona. Why do you think I never told you, huh? Kat wiped at her eyes, her chest heaving, and her nose running from the outburst. That bastard, Quinn, would be my guess, Rowan announced, glancing at Kat and me. Yes? Kat's face crumbled. He threatened to kill Fiona if I ever told her. Jesus. Rowan shook his head. I knew he was an evil bastard, but this is beyond evil. Fee. Kat ventured. Please believe me, Fee. I sat on the floor and cried, sobs racking my body, and realized none of this was Kat's fault, but I was too stunned to think straight. Warm arms engulfed me, pulling me to my feet and into an embrace. Don't cry, lass. Everything will be fine. Let's get away from here and forget about Sexflex. We need some time to figure out what happened and what he has done to all of you. Rowan's voice held tenderness, as he pushed my hair out of my eyes and wiped away tears with his thumb. As much as I loved the feel of his arms around me and his gentle touch, I shifted away from him. No. I know how important this is to you and the safety of your pack. I'll be fine. We can continue searching for information and try looking at his computer. I nodded to the laptop on the desk. He'll have a password on it, love, Rowan said. Rowan is right. We need to get you both back to the house. You and Kat should have a proper talk about everything. Wiping my nose with the sleeve of my shirt, I nodded. I'm sorry, Kat, but I felt overwhelmed. I know, and it's okay. That was an enormous blow, and I would have reacted the same. So here's what we are going to do, Rowan said, taking charge like an alpha. Leave your father a note and tell him after your wild experience that you and Kat are taking a brief holiday somewhere. Will he believe that? Rowan asked. He won't like it. Kat replied. No, but he will believe it. I've been telling him I want to go to New York, I said, as the plan took root in my head. He knows I'm sore with him, and he'll think I'm trying to punish him. How often does Quinn go out of town? When can we sneak back in? Rowan asked. Check his planner on the desk. Kat pointed to a brown leather-bound book. Rowan leafed through the pages. Bingo. He is leaving again on Wednesday, and I'm not sure where he's going, but he has 3 days marked off. Rowan studied the planner, his forehead marred in concentration. I don't know if it means anything, but he's leaving during the full moon. He looked up at us. It means he's going hunting, Rowan stated. Rowan smacked his forehead. Of course he is. What was I thinking? The bastard can't resist a full moon. As I listened, my father's wickedness sickened me. But was he my father? I wasn't sure about anything anymore. I just wanted out of this house, especially this room. Rowan. I crossed my arms and glared at him. I still want to see those photos. You have my word that when we get back to the house, I will give you the envelope. Now, let's get out of here. Do you girls have some essentials gathered? Yes. I told you we would be prepared. Come on, let's get out of here. As I looked around the vile room, I shivered. When we left the house, I let out a sigh of relief. I was so afraid my father, or whoever the monster was, would show up. As I sat in silence, thinking over everything I'd learned, I was more confused. Was I a part fairy? Did I belong to Cormac Quinn? And did he kill my mother? Was she my mother or just another lie on his growing list? Did she help my father with his devious deeds? And if she was my mother, why did she leave me with that beast? Somebody say something, Kat said. This silence is deafening. I think we are all in shock, Rowan announced. That was a colossal understatement. I am beyond shocked and have so many questions. How will I ever get the answers? I held my face in my hands, fighting back tears when a thought occurred to me. Wait. Are you taking us back to your house? Rowan announced with his eyes focused on the road. But you said we shouldn't stay at your house, remember? You said we would put your family and pack in danger. I know what I said, lass, but plans change. He glanced at me with a smile and back at the road. Your letter should suffice, and I doubt he will think you came back to hang out with some mangy werewolves. Rowan and Kat giggled, but I was too upset to find any humor in his words. Well, if you're sure, I told him. My father or whoever he is has caused your pack enough grief, and I don't want to add any more. Relax, lass, we are almost home. The word home felt nice, and I daydreamed of him and his house being my home, but it could never be. Cormac Quinn, regardless if he was my paternal father or not, ruined my chances, and being human and part fairy didn't help. My musings made me feel like I was on the verge of a meltdown. How much more could one person take? Deep breaths, Fiona. In through your nose and out through your mouth, I chanted to myself and tried to focus on the scenery. I felt the familiar knot in my tummy, and a flash of heat consumed me, and I knew nausea would come next if I didn't calm down. While I was prone to anxiety attacks, I hadn't had one in a while, and I didn't want it to happen in front of Rowan. When breathing through it didn't work, the urge to pull off my sweatshirt was all-consuming as beads of sweat popped along my forehead. I'm sorry, I said through ragged breaths and tore off the offending garment, pulling it over my head, and leaving me in a black tank top. I'm hot, and I might get sick. Rowan glanced at me with concern, and Kat yelled, roll down the windows. She's having a panic attack. Christ. Are you okay, lass? Should I pull over? What should I do? Pull over, bro, Rowan said. Does she need a doctor, Kat? No, I whispered as Rowan pulled onto a side street. Just need air. Kat got out and helped me out of the SUV. She pulled my hair back, just in time, before I spewed my stomach contents onto the grass, gravel, and weeds. That's it, love, she whispered near my ear. I need a cloth, or a napkin, or something real quick. She held her hand out, waiting. Rowan grabbed the fast food napkins from the center console and leaned over, handing them to Kat. What else can I do? Fee, do you have your medication with you? Did you remember to bring it? Kat asked me. I wiped my mouth and gulped air as tears from vomiting ran down my cheeks. Yes. They are in my Fendi bag. Embarrassed and spent, I backed up to the seat and perched on the edge. I couldn't bear to face Rowan yet. Kat dug through my bag, and found the small green prescription bottle, and placed a little blue pill in my hand. Take it, now, she said and narrowed her eyes at me. She knew I hated taking them, but needs must. They made me groggy and downright loopy, but they were a sure fix for an anxiety attack. I don't have any water, I moaned like a petulant child. Just let it melt under your tongue, you big baby, Kat scolded me and watched as I placed the nerve pill in my mouth. Are you going to be okay now? I hope so. I pushed up on my palms and situated myself in the seat, holding onto the napkins and staring straight ahead. Kat closed the door, and I let my head fall back on the headrest. When Kat was back in the vehicle, Rowan asked, Are you sure you're okay, lass? Should I get you a drink or water? I'm fine. Just take me home, Rowan, please. Sometime later, I awoke confused and thirsty, but it didn't take long to remember where I was and why. I reached over to feel for Kat, but her side of the bed was cold. It was pitch black, and I wondered where she could be. I couldn't remember much after taking that blasted pill, just a hazy memory of Rowan carrying me inside the house back to his mother's bedroom, and Kat getting me settled. Kat should be here with me again, but perhaps she slept elsewhere. I reached for the bedside table in search of my phone, to no avail. "Shit," I whispered, climbing out of bed with care. I still felt lightheaded and weak, but combining a panic attack and a little blue pill would do that. My feet hit the floor, and I stepped into my bag. Good, I thought, while digging around inside, and found my cell phone. It was 2 a.m. Sunday morning. I wondered where was Kat. It was unsettling not knowing where she was, and I didn't enjoy being alone in a strange place after everything I'd been through today. Now that I had my bearings, I needed the bathroom, something to drink, and I was going to find Kat. After relieving my bladder, I stepped out into the darkened hallway. Although not familiar with the house, I knew where the kitchen was and tiptoed, quiet as a mouse, using my phone to guide me. The light switch was inside the archway, and I flipped it on as I entered. "Fiona," Rowan whispered, startling me. "Are you all right, lass? Can I get you something?" He was sitting on a bar stool at the island with his hands wrapped around a mug. "Gosh!" I exclaimed with my hand over my chest. "You frightened me." The effect of the medication still had me drowsy, and I grabbed the counter to steady myself. "I'm sorry, but I wasn't expecting anyone at this time of night. How do you feel?" He jumped off the bar stool and strode over to me, his intense penetrating eyes peering into mine. The concern seemed etched on his face, and it made me blush. I couldn't meet Rowan's stare anymore. I saw too much in his expressive red-rimmed eyes and glanced at my phone. "Much better, thanks, but I woke up thirsty." With a gentle touch, he took my elbow, leading me to the table by the windows, and held out a chair for me. Sometimes he could be kind, causing me to fall for him again. "Now, lass. You relax, and I'll grab you some water. Are you hungry? You missed supper." "No, I don't think my stomach could handle food yet, but water would be grand," I said over my shoulder and glanced at the inky sky, noticing the twinkling stars and the moon so bright and beautiful, casting a peaceful glow. Rowan placed the bottled water in front of me and sat across the table. "Thank you," I said before taking a large gulp of the cold liquid. "Ah, much better." I took a few more sips, feeling self-conscious as he stared at me. "Where's Kat?" "Kat?" he ventured, his brows knitting together in confusion. "In bed, I would presume. Did you put her in a guest room instead of with me?" I asked with a pout. "No, Rianne put her belongings in the room while we got you settled, and she went to bed after we had Chinese takeout." My heart sped up at the implication, and dozens of dangerous scenarios entered my mind. "Well, she's gone." "Oh, what could have happened to her, Rowan?" I jumped up from the chair, glaring at him. "Don't just sit there. We have to find her." "What if my father?" "Take it easy, lass," Rowan interrupted. "Nobody has breached our security. She's somewhere in this house, or the guards would have alerted me." My breathing and heartbeat slowed down, and I realized I trusted him. "But where in the house?" "I don't know, but I intend to find out. Do you want to come or go back to bed?" "I'm coming," I told him and took a long drink from my water before following him. "Let's wake Rianne so he can help us search. It'll be quicker that way, and you can get more rest. I can tell you need it." Bloody brilliant. I must look a right mess. At the top of the staircase, he stopped at the first door on the right and grabbed the handle. I pulled on the back of his t-shirt and whispered, "Are you not gonna knock?" "No, lass. I'm waking him up so we can find your wayward friend." I shrugged. "Well, that's rude." Rowan opened the door and flicked on the light. "Oh, for fuck's sake, Rianne!" he yelled. I gasped, placing my hand over my mouth, trying not to laugh. I didn't react as shocked as Rowan because I knew Kat. Jesus, Rowan. Some privacy, man. Rian growled and tried to cover himself and Kat, but it was too late. We had seen it all. Every dirty detail. Don't leave the club without knowing what happens next. Hit that subscribe button for more thrilling tales.